A major downside to highly stringent standards was the high number of students who would be asked to leave for academic reasons. When Father Burke warned the class of 1941 on their first day as freshmen that only half of them would graduate, he was not exaggerating. The school tracked the dire-sounding mortality rate, or the level of students who were expelled for poor grades. From 1914 through 1933, the mortality rate at Regis averaged 52%.
The written record, kids didn't do well, they were asked to leave. There wasn't a lot of second chances.
And you come in and basically it was sink or swim. If you were smart enough to get in, you probably did not have to do any work in grammar school. And the trouble was, once you got here, you had to really begin to work. And if you didn't pick up on that pretty quickly and start doing work, it became very hard to catch up. Something like Latin, for example. If you go and just half learn Latin for the first, 6-8 weeks, and suddenly realize, hey, wait a minute, this is getting complicated. It's very hard to catch up. We did all of Latin grammar in freshman year, 75 chapters of the textbook. So you're doing more than a chapter a week. And if you didn't keep up, you fell behind. And there were a number of ways in which you could fail out.
In those early years, sometimes upwards of half of those who admitted did not graduate. They were let go, expelled, asked to leave, almost overwhelmingly for academic reasons. It was very demanding, and there was little to no extra help given. By today's standards, that looks uncaring, if not draconian. I don't think it was that different than it was in other schools at that point also.
74 was a failing grade. We were on semesters. You had 3 marking periods and the January exam, 3 marking periods and the June exam. If you flunked 4 exams in either January or June, you flunked out. If you flunked 2 subjects, you flunked out. There was a lot of ways of flunking out.
The consequences on academic deficiencies were harsh and uncompromising. At the start of their final semester before graduation, 3 boys in the class of 1941 had to forfeit their scholarship in January and withdraw over academic shortcomings.
And I don't think it was any different than a typical other Jesuit high school in terms of being a very demanding classical education that had very high expectations. And the thought generally was, whether the student didn't have the intellectual chops or he didn't have the discipline to make a go at it. There were kids who were asked to leave for discipline reasons, but those, as far as I could see the record, those were not that often.
At the start of each semester in September and January, Regis boys would regularly notice classmates missing from their ranks.
In the first year and a half is when we lost most of the students that we were going to end up losing. You might lose a few after that, but basically the bulk of them went in freshman and the first half of sophomore year.
Around the time the 1941 boys attended Regis, the attrition or mortality rate between the freshman and sophomore years was generally about 30%, or around 50 to 55 boys. Another 10 to 15% would leave in subsequent semesters, mostly during or just after sophomore year. The class of 1941, however, would buck this pattern. After their freshman year, only 29 individuals, or 16% of the original 176 boys, would leave. But in the next year, there would be a complete reversal. 49 boys, or almost 30% of the original 176, would resign their scholarships between their sophomore and junior years. What could have triggered this large, unprecedented dropout after their second year? One reason could have been the effects of a short but very sharp recession in 1938. Nationwide, GDP contracted by 10% and unemployment climbed to 20%. It likely necessitated some boys to leave school to find work to help support their families.
Even going back to the very beginning of the school, if you take a look at the figures for the class of 1918, which would be the guys who entered in 1914, that a number of them left, not for academic reasons, but because they got a job. and your high school diplomas weren't that necessary, and you got a job, you took the job. And that was certainly true as well during the Great Depression.
But there was also a major but largely forgotten event that impacted the school.
Of all the signals of the sea, none turned the faces of hardy sailors more grim than the flags that spell hurricane warning. One morning late in September 1938, the dread signals swung aloft along the Florida coast.
The Great New England Hurricane ranks as one of the most costly and deadly hurricanes in U.S. history, and it's often compared to more recent hurricanes like Sandy. It severely damaged or destroyed more than 57,000 homes and killed nearly 700 people. As the Federal Emergency Management Agency had yet to be formed, governmental response to the 1938 hurricane's destruction was slow and lacked coordination, with damage to infrastructure particularly severe. The hurricane was one of those once-in-a-century type disruptions that many future generations of Regians would experience during their time at 84th Street. It was almost certainly the case that the aftermath of the New England hurricane, when combined with a bad economy and Regis's severe academic standards, created a perfect storm that resulted in a large, unprecedented second-year dropout in the class of 1941.